It's live because it's 7 o'clock.
All right, man.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Northwest Fishing Club podcast. Tonight, Todd and I have a special guest, Dave Strahan, with us. Dave has been in the tackle industry for over 40 years, just retired from Big Rock Sports, and is also on the board of the Northwest Sportfishing Industry Association, the NSIA. So thank you for joining us tonight, Dave. How has the retired life been treating you? And have you been able to get on the water since leaving Big Rock Sports?
First of all, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Stephen. And yes, I find that I'm settling into this retirement life real well. It's coming nice. It's been real nice. I did get an opportunity to get over and fish on the Coos Friday evening and Saturday, and we brought home fish. It wasn't stellar fishing, but we got enough to make it worth our while and to have some fun fighting fish, and got a mess of crabs. So yeah, and I look forward now that I am retired to a whole lot more fishing. So that's going
I
to be
bet.
good. Yeah.
You got any plans for the next trip?
Nothing specific. We are I say we, my fishing buddies and I, talking about getting up to Diamond Lake before long. And then, as I was telling Todd earlier, this is my favorite time to fish the Middle Rogue. I like fishing those half pounders. They're just a lot of fun. Generally speaking, there's enough action to keep you busy. So I intend to do some of that. Just play it by ear. And we got into something this summer that I hadn't done in a long time. And I thinking about trying, as it cools off a little, is crappie fishing out at Selma.
Yeah.
We did really well. And I like to eat fish. So I'm hoping to get out there and get some crappie before it gets too cold too.
Nice. I used to love fishing for the crappie out here at the Agate Lake locally, just in the
Yeah,
springtime. But with it kind of having the dump up above it, never really kept too many of them to eat.
yeah, that that's an issue. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, you've been spending a whole lot of time. It's been over 40 years. Is that right in the tackle industry?
Yeah,
Has that all
I
been with,
actually
oh, I
go
was going
ahead.
to say, has that all been with Big Rock Sports or was there something before that?
No, there's a kind of a trail before that. I actually got into the business in 1976. I was a broke, starving college student at at the time, SOU. And so I went there and I got a job behind the retail counter at the Blackbird in Medford. And I worked there for a little over a year. And some of the managers there broke away and opened a store in White City called the Big Bear Shopper. And I went out there and was their sporting goods manager for about a year or so, and that never got off the ground. They ended up going out of business, so I was unemployed for a while, and then I ended up coming back to Grants Pass. I was born and raised in Grants Pass, and I came back to Grants Pass and managed an independent sporting goods shop called Milo's Sporting Goods, and I managed that for about a year, a little over a year. And then there was a small tackle distributor in Central Point called Pfaff Wholesale. And Don Pfaff offered me a job on the road. And so I went to work for him in 1981. And then I've been on the road ever since until I retired, just like I say, a couple of weeks ago. When I left Pfaff, I went to work for a company that was called Sportland Distributing out of Vancouver, Washington, and we serviced all the Payless drugstores as well as the independents. And then Payless ended up buying us, so I became what they called a sporting goods coordinator for Payless drugstores, and I oversaw 33 sporting goods departments from Chico, California, up to Albany, Oregon, basically. And I did that for 13 years, and then I was offered a job at a company called All Sports Supply out of Clackamas. They were at the time a relatively small distributorship, but they had been in business for a whole long time. Their main customer was Bi-Mart and as well as the independents. So I did that, and then in I did that, and then they became Big Rock Sports. Big Rock bought them, and Big Rock was stationed out of the North Carolina. Big Rock is a big rock out in the Atlantic Ocean. They marlin fish,
Huh.
and so that's how the Big Rock Sports came. And like I said, then I was with them until I retired September 2nd. So It's been a good run. I got into the business because I love to fish and hunt, and there's not a lot of opportunity in Grants Pass, Oregon, to have a good job to raise a family and such. And my dad had worked in the plywood mill for 32 years. And he told me if he caught me making a career out of that, he'd kick my butt. So I didn't go there, which is fine. I didn't. I did work summers there for a while. It wasn't for me. But at any rate, obviously that went away. So I just feel fortunate. I've been able to stay in Grants Pass and on the Rogue River, and like I say, have a career and raise a family and selling the tools and the toys that I like to use myself. So it's been a good run.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Now, you've been doing this for quite a while. Have there been any trends that you've noticed? What's changed since you started in the 70s and 80s versus today's world?
Well, yeah, there have. There's not near the number of the small independent tackle shops. It used to be. They were, in every little town and such on the coast and up and down I-5 and such. And what with the introduction of the chain stores and the internet, there's not as many of those. They're still out there, obviously, but like I say, back in the 70s and early 80s, they were on every corner almost, and so that's changed a lot. It's been interesting over the decades to watch the trends in tackle. I remember, like I say, I was a sporting goods coordinator for Payless drugstores, and one of my coworkers out of the Sacramento, California market called and said, "Dave, there's this new lures out for salmon that are just hot. You got to get them in your store. They're called quick fish." I said, "Oh, really cool." I said, "Yeah, I'll send you a sample." Well, he sent me a sample, and it was a number 15, and we'd never used anything that big up here for salmon. I told him he had to be crazy, but I was the one that was crazy. Obviously, we sell tons of them today. So things like that have been interesting. As a rule, it seems like the trends started down, like I say, in northern and central California and moved up. Although more recently, the trend of the soft beads and such, those came from up north. So it's been an interesting watching that. Like I say, the soft bead thing now is just huge.
Yeah,
very interesting. And then, of course, the decline in fisheries, that's definitely made a difference. We still have fish to catch, but not like it was back in the 80s and such, when there were more. But, I think back on my career, like I say, when I was working at Milo's Sporting Goods in Grants Pass, the old timers would come in a lot, Glenn Woldridge, Pritchett's, and some of those old river rats, and talk about how they missed the good old days and how they missed the 50s and 60s because there were so many more fish. And so it seems to have been a progression going along.
Right. Now,
but yeah, it's been good.
You kind of mentioned that a lot of the old timers talk about like the 50s and 60s and how many fish there were compared to the 80s. Recently, I was looking up a lot of the data. It's more so for the gold ray and above, but there was actually more fish coming over gold ray according to the data in the 80s and in the 90s and even in the early 2000s than there ever was back in the 50s and 60s. Do you think that, if the data says that there was more fish, were they just easier to catch back in the day? Or were we not actually recording the data accurately? It's just kind of interesting looking at that data and hearing those stories from the old timers.
Yeah, and I've looked at the data too, and I think it's a lot of it is perception and just human nature. Just like today, I see it on Facebook and such. Oh, there's no fish in that river. Well, baloney. There are fish in that river, and I can catch them. If I can catch them, anybody should be able to go catch them. So, like I say, I think a lot of it is sour grapes perception, to be honest with you. And obviously, we don't know the hard numbers now. The gold rays are down, but I think the runs are cyclical, and there's so much of it that is out of the hands of ODF and W and such. It's just ocean conditions. We can't control that, never will,
right.
And those sorts of things. So, like I say, I think a lot of it is just perception and human nature to want to say things were better in the good old days. such.
And then, kind of going off of that, I blanked. Forgot where I was going with that. Um, Todd, did you have anything real quick?
Yes, I do. And so, just sitting back and listening, I think a lot of it is the world we live in now. It's a double-edged sword. We have to get the information out there to people on how to catch these fish. And I make a living doing it. There's days that I don't catch fish. It has to do. I had the talk today with my guys. He's like, well, we need to go down and tip it. I said, absolutely not. The going down and tip it is the last thing that I change. The very first thing that I look at is presentation. How good is my presentation, where it's at, how it's effectively moving. And, it's all everybody wants to think that we have a magic bait, we have a magic scent, or we have a magic place, and we don't. What we have is the information of we're on the water almost every day. And so we go right to work with what we know of yesterday. Now that's only going to take you so far. When you, I'm just going to, because it's bug and bubble season, and this is the easiest way to explain it other than an indicator. Watching an indicator move in the water is a lot different than watching a bobber float in the water. So what I see most of my people fighting is there's a nice balance between enough belly in your line and mending. At what everybody doesn't, they don't really know where that line is. And so imagine your bobber sits just like this. It's going down the river. If you mend it, it's gonna pull downriver because that belly's downriver. So it's gonna move that bobber downriver. As soon as you tip that bobber, you're moving faster than the current. So we all know fish want it going the same speed as the current. And so if you got too big a belly and your bobber's constantly riding like this, it may not look like much to you because you don't do it as much as we do. But as well as I do, this bobber's moving faster through the water than this bobber right here. And so, and that is a huge thing that I mean, literally, I can fish a spot, have the rod in my hand, and hook fish, whether it be trout or steelhead, doesn't matter. Or if I put the rod in your hand and you got that just a little bit of tilt. And so, I mean, you got to really pay attention to those little things. And so, okay, so I got the right flies. I got the right presentation. Now they could be line shot. They might not be. Where are you fishing? Are you fishing a long hole like Denman? If you're fishing, the wall there as you come around the corner, those steelhead can see that bait coming from a long ways away. So they've already seen it. Where we're fishing little buckets in the upper river, they don't get that luxury of seeing it that far away, because as soon as it comes off that drop and drops down, they're either going to bite it or they're not. So they don't have the time and this is just what I think, this is just my personal opinion. They don't have the time to dissect that bait long enough to decide whether I'm going to be line shy or not. There's too much reaction. And so farther down in the hole, absolutely. If they're not biting down there, then I'm going to change my tippet or go down to a 6-pound fluorocarbon. And there's good and bad when you do that. One, the fluorocarbon, yeah, you can't see it. Well, either can I. I'm almost 50 years old and I'm having a hard time tying knots. And so that's not my go-to. But it's really because of that, is I have a hard time seeing it myself. And so, dissect all of that. This morning it was raining. And so the colors and the flies that we're using are totally different than when that sun got high, bluebird sky, immediately shut that down, changed over, and we went right back to work. And so, you have to be fluid with don't go out there with an agenda. I guess is what I'm saying is keep your mind open to the changing conditions and really pay attention on where you're fishing. That is, I see it every day. I'll bet you I say at least 100 times a day on my drift boat, do not let the river hypnotize you, because you will cast the same spot every time and you'll run the same drift 1,000 times. So when we sit down in a hole, I give you the far side parameter and the inside parameter. And then I want you to dissect that area between those 2 points like you're looking for a dead body. 6 inches. Cast right, cast close, cast 6 inches farther, 6 inches farther, 6 inches farther, and paint the whole bottom of that river with those flies. And you'll find the seam that they're laying in. The nice thing about steelhead is they're aggressive. I've watched steelhead come out from underneath stuff or behind rocks to bite a fly. They'll move 4 or 5 feet, but presentation is huge. Are there as many steelhead in the river as the hype of this year? I think there was. It's I think there still are, but like I said, where I'm finding fish, we are dissecting. If I can find a 4-foot section that's maybe 1.5 feet wide of water where I can't see the bottom of the river, I would cast there. I'll give you that tidbit right now. They are holding in places that I've fished places that I really don't fish. Literally, if I can find a little bucket, I'm putting a fly there. And you do that over 11 river miles, you're bound to find 2 steelhead in those spots, right? It's literally law of averages at that point. If you cast where you're normally catching steelhead, there's so many trout there that you're not going to, they're on you before. I was telling you earlier, we were catching 2 trout at a time. We had trout on both flies a lot today, to the point to where it's just, now I'm just crimping barbs, because when you're catching that many trout, you got to be resource conscious, right? Even though it's with a barbed hook, it may cost you a steelhead later on. You have to, right? It's a smart thing to do. So you're not damaging those, because, some of those single egg patterns that we use, they're small. It's, number 12, number 14s. And so, they'll take them pretty deep. And so, by the time you get that out with the barb on it, you've hurt that fish. So it's a balancing act. And so I would start there, really focus on your presentation. I'll go back to, we live in a instant gratification life. You look at when we go fishing to go fishing. We want to fish, and so I love the process. I really enjoy the process of breaking it down. All right, I beat you at your own game today. And there's days they beat me. It is what it is, but it's focused more on your presentation and then elevate to where you're fishing and then elevate to what you're using. That would be my 3 steps to success, is that right there.
So do you guys think that you kind of broke down like the whole fly, bug, and bubble that we're going through right now? Do you guys think that people go more in depth now on the techniques and kind of study the fisheries better? Or,
I don't.
Dave, you were kind of talking about like the soft beads, the quick fish. We kind of have these trends. Are people educating themselves more on how to fish for these different fisheries? Could that be why people back in the day, if you were good at catching a fish on one technique, there wasn't, that information couldn't get out as readily, as easily. Now we've got the internet. So, the soft beads and the quick fish, even back in the day, could spread quicker than something back in the 50s or 60s. Did you see those trends, especially later in the career, Dave, where something would become hot really fast, and that people were just educating themselves and doing that? Or did you not notice that?
I did notice that. the way I look at it and what I've observed is we've got what I call the blue collar fisherman, the guy that wants to go fishing and doesn't put in the time and energy to study and learn the details. Like Todd was it's very detail oriented. The successful ones are. So I see both, but there's a couple of things with the internet. Like you say, the word gets out quicker. Oh, this was hot, or there's a bunch of fish up by Tuvelle, or whatever the case may be. And then I'm sure you guys have seen it. You'll see guys on the river and they'll get on their cell phone. And fishing on the Chetco and such, I know guys that'll get a phone call from one of their buddies and they'll pull their boat out and move to upriver or downriver, wherever the case may be. So that's been a big influence too. It's changed how things work. It used to be it was word of mouth at the boat ramp or the bar after you took off the river. Now, like I say, they get on their cell phone and they're talking. So yeah, it has changed a lot. But it was interesting hearing what Todd was saying. I think what I call the blue collar angler needs to learn, and a lot of them haven't yet, the detail aspect of it all. It's not just cast it out there and drag it through the run. It's like he says, watch your bobber, understand how your bait or your lure's moving through the hole, and those sorts of things. And that just comes with experience for the most part. That's why a lot of times, I'd have a lot of interaction when I was in a store doing an order and talking to anglers and such. And then oftentimes a new fisherman would want to know certain things. And I tell them, hire a guide. If you can do it, hire a guide for the day. You're going to learn a ton about our local fishery if you do that. And I think, like I say, because they don't often understand the detail aspect of it. So.
Right.
That's definitely what I see the most. And, gear wise, the why we use braided on these bobber rods, why I use a 10'2" rod. It's break it down to, if you got an 8.6 rod and that's all you can afford, awesome. At least you're going fishing. But know the limitations of that rod. You're not going to fish clear across the river from the bank. We're in our boats. We can pick that line up a long ways away with a 10.5-foot rod. The gear selection, there's a lot that goes, it's all the little things add up to one glorious result. That's the days of, everybody wants to go with the new latest and greatest trends and techniques, soft beats, Brandon being our tackle. I'm so happy to not have egg goo on my hands, winter steelhead season anymore, that I can't thank Brandon enough. And so they worked very well. But, so do you run 65-pound braid or do you run 30? And understand what those two different diameters, it may not seem very much to you and to your eyeball, but understanding what those two diameters of line do in that current is a difference. Now, do I use a 3/8 ounce sinker? Do I use a 1/2 ounce? Back that down to 30 pound and notice the difference of drag you get there. It's all those little bitty things. And the internet, I think, is good and bad. As far as the information will get you to the river. And you have to be willing to change that. Everybody says, well, what leader length do you use? That's the other number one thing that we get. What leader length? Well, I've got 3 measurements. I've got this one, I've got this one, I've got this one. And so it literally is. I don't think leader length is the end all that, but everybody just stresses themselves out over leader length. Today, God, it was the dropper fly. I had 8-inch tags. I had 2-foot tags. And the only reason why I had 2-foot tags was because we were going through so many different flies that it just kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And at 8 inches, that's where I cut it off and retied it. And so it really, and it didn't seem to matter. It was more about what fly we had on there instead of how long it was from the ugly bug. And so don't be afraid to kind of forget everything that you learned, that somebody told you, and just dissect it and try something new. Don't be afraid to throw caution to the wind and put it out there. But like I said, presentation is by far the most important thing. If it's not moving right, they're not going. I don't care if you have the best bait in the world. If it's not moving right, they're not going to bite. So that's just what I think. It's. I will tell you, on a slow day, I overthink everything, and I'm surgical. I will go against everything that I just told you. So, but yes, there are fish in the river.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned you.
Go ahead, Dave.
It's interesting you mentioned rod length. I can't tell you how many times I would be working in a store and have someone come up to me and say, what rod would be best? I want to fish for steelhead and fall salmon. I said, well, there's not one rod that really is best. There's some that'll work and you can do it, but if you really want to do it right, you won't try to do it both with one rod. And there again, you sound like a car salesman, but in my mind, that's a fact. I like to fish real light for steelhead. I'll fish a 9.5 real light rod for steelhead. And if I hook a fall salmon that, I'm screwed. So anyway, it's interesting.
We do it the right line with the right reel. You gotta have a nice track. That's really, really important. I had another guy tell me this year that he's got the perfect trout rod and the perfect kokanee jigging rod. And I started to laugh and I said, no, you don't. Because those are two separate rods. You cannot do those two things with the same rod. It's not the same rod. And so that's the other part that I would stress too. Right now, with the size of flies that I'm using, I'm going to get a color that really, really works because I got my bucket of goodies right here, and I'm not letting this color out that's working really, really well. I mean, this is the best one that I use right here, this color. And so let me see. My rods, the rods that I run, and I'd have to go look at the model, but it's a 6 to 10 line rating, 10-2. That Striker builds there in Eugene. And this is why I use that rod. These are all right. So I don't know if you can see, I'm going to put it as close as I can. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see my fingernail and how little that hook is. I'll put it right on my shirt there.
I think we can see that there.
See that there?
Yeah.
And so the reason, and this is just a shrimp pink, not a huge secret. I mean, it's single egg pattern shrimp pink. So you have to have a rod. The first thing guys do is when I tighten my drags. I'm like, nope, don't touch them. I mean, they're set to where, because that rod is limber enough to where I can flesh hook a steelhead with that fly and get it to the boat because that rod's going to absorb all of that hit. If you go up a line rating, you're going to rip that fly out of that fish's mouth every time. I don't care where you have that drag set. And so, it's matching the rod to what you're using is just as important as, you're going to get bit, but now you're going to get fish to the net. There's a lot of that. The flies just aren't big enough to bone hook them. You're not going to jab them in the top of the roof of the mouth or, through their lip. You're going to you got that little piece of meat right in their gum line, because that yarn is it's not glow bug yarn. It's a different kind of yarn. It's super sticky. It's going to get caught in their teeth, and they can't just spit it right back out. And so you just have them by the little bit of a meat. That's it. And so you got to have a rod that can absorb that hit. When you touch one of my drags, I mean, it's nothing to pull line out, but trying to get it out the end of that rod because the rod gives like it does, it's a whole different ballgame. And so, I mean, again, this is just if you're losing fish, we all know guides that went 4 for 9 today, 5 for 10. If you're losing that many fish in a day and you're not changing what you got going on, there's a problem. It's either hook size, rod and line combination. There's something going on there. You should not be losing that many fish. Fish on the drag, taking line, actually hooked fish, not opportunities. I mean, actually fighting fish, losing them if you're not getting wrapped up around stuff. And so there are fish in the river. We're working hard for every one that we get. But there are fish in the river.
So Dave, we've been talking a lot about the tackle and kind of the economics around that. You're also on the board of the NSIA. So what do they do exactly? Could you explain what their mission is?
Yeah, well, what we do is, we lobby and work for the sport fishing industry, the retailers and guides that are in the business, and we have a full-time lobbyist in Washington, in state of Washington, and a full-time Oregon lobbyist, and we're very instrumental, especially up north, because that's where the numbers are on the Columbia and Puget Sound and up there. But in fact, we were instrumental. Our executive director has been doing this since the 90s. She's built tremendous relationships. Liz Hamilton is her name, and she's built tremendous relationships in the capitals of both Washington and Oregon. We were instrumental. They just reopened parts of the Columbia after they'd closed it, and we, with her work through ODFNW and such, we were able to get that reopened. So basically what we do is we lobby for the sport fishing businesses, the industries. I've always kind of joked and said that sport fishing in terms of economics is the Rodney Dangerfield of our economy. It doesn't get the the notice and the what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, people don't understand how important it is. And, it's billions of dollars in the Northwest, and the ripple. It's not just tackle, but it's pop, soda, it's gasoline, it's boats, it's all those things. And like I say, it's literally billions of dollars. And so what we do is we fight to maintain and increase the business communities around sport fishing. And it's been quite successful. I there again, and unlike some of the groups out there, we are not as probably vocal and out there in what we do. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes and in the halls of the Capitol, and but it's very successful. It works very well.
Well, I would say that's an easy. I mean, as where organizations are today, and where people want to be as transparent as we can, there's certain. I don't think it's good that everybody doesn't know the good work that they're doing. I think that's. I think that's. Well, I mean, trying to choose my words carefully here. I think that's an easy claim without any proof in the pudding. In all honesty, we're the information that we all have access to at the touches of our fingers now is. I think we need more of putting it out there, the good work that you're doing, so you can get that support to do even better. I mean, just as a devil's advocate, I guess, we're we're trying to get people to get behind the different organizations to support them, because it is important. I agree wholeheartedly. But if you can't tell people, the real impact that you're doing, a lot of people don't know what that means, lobbying in the White House. That just means you're taking my money. You're in Washington, D.C. and shit, pay me $100,000. I'll do it. Those are pretty generic terms. But I mean, that's literally what people are thinking, and where we're kind of bottlenecked now is people want to see what they're supporting. That, you know what I mean?
No, I totally agree.
Yes. That's one of the things that I hear people, the people that I interact with say the most is, how do I know where my money's going? I mean, I think we need to get out of that. We need to get out of that mind, that way of thinking. We have to put forward. This is what we're, like you just said. She was instrumental in getting the Columbia reopened. I have buddies that work up there, and my heart goes out to them because the numbers did not. I don't guide up there. I don't know a lot what's up there. I just talk to my friends. It didn't seem like the data supported that decision to close that down, from what they've been told year after year prior to that. And so, the moving the goalpost, we talked about a couple shows ago. And so I would be more interested on, hard pressed. What are you doing? How are you doing it? And how does my support help you achieve those goals? That's.
Yeah, and I totally agree. That's one thing I bring to the board, or bring up on board meetings and such, is that we need to toot our horn more.
Absolutely.
People need to know what we're doing. And that Columbia thing, again, I agree totally with what you said there. The big elephant in the room on the Columbia was the Tulies. And
but a lot of people don't know
more than they predicted. And so
they've been telling those guys for years that the Tulies were already by that time.
Right.
And so what sense did it make to shut the river down? Because those Tulies are already gone. They're already through. You've already told us this for how many years? And then they're like, yeah, no, you're catching too many. And so, again, moving the goalpost.
And you're right. And that's exactly what happened. And, Bill Monroe Jr. guides up there, and Bob Reese guides up there. They're both on our board and such. They're on the river all the time. They know, what they're catching and what they're releasing and those sorts of things. And that's what they were saying from the get-go. Those Tulies are gone for the most part. Obviously there's no exact, but for the most part, they were already upriver. Leave us alone. Let us go fishing.
Well, as long as the numbers support it, which I think they did. It's yes, absolutely. Let them fish. Let them. Let people have that opportunity.
One thing that does play into that a lot of people don't probably realize is that we do have folks on the other side of the coin. So, you got to shut it down. You got to shut it down. We got to protect those fish. And what I consider some of the extremists of, we can't kill a fish. And so I understand, the decision makers conundrum that they're in. They're getting hammered from both sides.
Absolutely. And so, yes, it's not.
And then we have the commission, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that I haven't quite put my finger on. Leonard answered a lot of questions that I had on that, but I'm still digging, finding answers on exactly how all that works. It's is it an advisory? Is it law? Yes, we've opened up a can of worms to where it's got me it's got me hungry for the answers. I don't live my life anymore on what assumption that I want to have because it feels good. I have to retrain my mind to think I have to have proof. And then you get into the debate, what study do you want to look at and what do you want to believe in that study? How do I know what you handed me? Me and Stephen were talking about this a little bit ago on my way home. everybody's passionate about what we're trying to do here, and everybody's waiting for us to prove to them how things work. Nobody wants to do the research, and research is a funny word, right? It's the what I know about the Google is it will always show me exactly what I want. And so you've got to really, it's tough, man. You got to really dig down, and then you got to trust some people that you hope aren't lying to you. And it goes back to common sense of, all right, I can see where that makes sense, and come up with the best decision that you can. I think people are too hung up on right or wrong, to the point to where they handicap themselves, and it's not that black and white. It will never be that black and white. And so
science is not black and white, and there's few absolutes. There's tons of variables, and the average guy, like you say, it may look up something on Google, and all of a sudden he's a freaking biologist in his mind.
Absolutely.
It drives me nuts, quite frankly. And over the decades, like I say, I've been involved in a lot of different organizations and such, with ODF&W and watershed councils and task force and such. And I've never met anybody in the decision makers that gets up in the morning and says, I want to see how I can screw this up. They're all trying to do their best. But like I say, there's very few absolutes, and that's just science, and that's just nature.
Right. I agree. It's not, I wish it was as easy as this equals that. I've had my eyes opened on a couple of the issues that I have, that I'm pretty, and me and you will go round and round about this, is the killing wild fish. I do not. I have a boat policy in place. My guide service, I do not allow you to kill wild fish, and that I own the company, and that's my right. What you do in your boat, that, as long as it's legal, that's your right. I didn't realize. I still don't agree with it. I will not allow it. Just because in the Rogue River, I think we have ample opportunity for hatchery fish. I don't see the need to harvest wild fish at that time of year. And I say that because if you go back on any post through Facebook, and I'm going to ask you this right away, Dave, is how many downer summers do you see being killed on Facebook posts during the wild retention time? It's a lot. And I think, and we have to, you don't have to do anything, but and that's why I don't like that rule, is because people are not killing wild winter steelhead. They're killing, there's a plethora of downer summer steelhead that go over the 24-inch mark that people are harvesting because they can. And so it's kind of a list of things of why I don't agree with it, not just because it's a wild steelhead. It's more than that. And so I had a talk with a gentleman this week, and I think it's good that they're having an extra license for the wild fish retention, so they can get those numbers and that data. I think that's the first step in us figuring out if this is a viable thing or it's not. And so I think it was a great compromise. It wasn't just one side or the other. It was a meet in the middle, I think. And so we got to start somewhere. We can't be enemies against each other because, you believe in the killing of the wild fish and I don't. We're both allies enjoying a resource. We can't let that be the deciding factor of separation. We've got enough separation in our society. We don't need one more thing. You know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. And there again, it's a conundrum because from an industry standpoint, and I've lived this, is that when you start telling people they can't retain a fish, a lot of them stop fishing. Yeah, I ain't going.
Oh yeah,
and,
no, you're wrong.
But
you're
on the other
absolutely
hand,
wrong.
You make a really valid point about killing a downer and not realize till they get home and, oh my God, this meat's white and it's no good. Well, you killed a fish that's not a fresh fish.
Yeah, but I
disagree. That comes with education. Yeah.
But I disagree on that. I guide for trophy lake trout up in Odell. It is 100% catch and release.
Yep.
I am booked solid for every year moving forward. That's education, and I mean, look at the Umpquaws. You don't go to the Umpqua to fish to keep a steelhead. Those guys, any guide on the Umpqua River will tell you those guys go there to catch big fish.
Where we're going to differ is that you're dealing with a different clientele than, again, what I call the blue collar angler, the guy that goes down to Weimar.
That's fair.
Such. One of my major accounts in Roseburg was Waldron's Outdoor Sports.
Uh-huh.
And when they went strictly to a catch and release up there, he showed me the numbers, and it hurt his business. It hurt his business substantially, significantly. In fact, the owner is still lobbying, trying to reverse that. But like I say, I don't disagree with what you're saying, except I believe you're talking about a totally different class of angler than what is a whole lot of the industry, and that's, again, the blue collar guy that I call.
Yeah, but that guy owns a tackle shop in Roseburg, you said?
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, but I think that's unfair that you can put all that on the retention of wild fish. I mean, you gotta, it's online prices. There's a lot of factors there that I don't think the not keeping wild fish warrants the blunt of that. It may very well have a part.
Do either of you guys know when the wild steelhead harvest up there was cut off? Was it?
I don't, Stephen.
I don't recall. It hasn't been all that long, but yeah, and I understand what you're saying. Again, there's a lot of variables, except in this case, it was pretty clear to him when that rule went into effect, there was an immediate change and drop off. And I saw it, in fact, as a distributor. I didn't sell as much tackle up there. Again, the guy the blue collar angler you got to buy a license, you got to buy a tag, you got to buy tackle, you got to buy the gas and all those things that I mentioned earlier. And there's a lot of them. And then I've heard it many, many times that's how they justify their expense, is that they're bringing some food home. So there again, I see it as two very distinct types of angling. The guy that can afford to hire a guide, especially those that do it repeatedly, that's a whole different animal than the blue collar angler that, like I say, that goes to Weimar and buys a combo and wants to bring home a fish. It's two different classes.
I'll give you that. You are correct. There is a separation there, and I don't begrudge anybody for wanting to feed their family. I grew up doing it. I'm fortunate and blessed enough now to where I don't live a subsistence way of life. I hunt and fish because I can and I want to, but not because I have to harvest for the meat. I don't depend on that meat or that resource to survive. And I think, and I've said this again, I've said this a lot, people want to over romanticize the idea of they live in a subsistence way of life. And the reality is they don't. I'll guarantee the same guy you're talking about has alcohol, tobacco, and lottery, and probably some dispensary in his truck. But yeah,
I'm more thinking about that's how he justifies it to mama. That he's going to go buy a new rod and reel and such.
Yeah, and
there are those, though, like you say, that are the romanticized. That's their subsistence and such. But
right.
What I've seen more commonly, like I say, is that's how they justify the expense, is that they're bringing some food home. And I'll admit, I'm a fish snob. I want a nice fresh fish. I don't want to go to Fred Meyer and buy a freaking salmon from Alaska that's probably been in a refrigerator for 2 weeks.
I didn't say I buy fish.
So, Dave, another fishery that kind of got shut down was the harvest of sturgeon up on the Columbia. Did you serve up there with Big Rock Sports? Did you happen to notice tackle sales decline up there when that harvest fishery got shut down?
I didn't. I've never serviced that far north. However,
Okay.
my coworker up there did. Yes.
One of
Yeah.
the, and I, yes, Stephen, that decimated a lot of livelihoods, that decision. And because, Cody, Herman there, Day One Outdoors, went up there, was fortunate enough to go up there and fish with him and caught that one on the bobber this year. If you've never done that, Dave, I strongly encourage you to go up to the Columbia. Dude, we were catching sturgeon in 1.5 feet of water on a bobber. It's one of the most, I'm here to tell you. That guy, Cody's got it down. I had so much fun. But what he said is, dude, July, I mean, if you wanted to catch 30, 40 sturgeon in a day, go in July, it's catch and release. But people don't want to pay to do it because they can't kill a fish. For whatever reason, that fishery, people don't want to just go catch that fish. They want to go kill that fish to eat it. And I'll tell you right now, you'll have more fun catching and releasing sturgeon in July up there, going down to the store and buying 30 pounds of sturgeon meat and letting it be what it is. You'll have way more fun than catching fish just to kill it. Because that's why they had to shut it down with the bycatch of the commercial fleet was killing too many. And so the sport fishery took a hit. Again, this is just what I remember of the time in 2013 when they shut that down. Don't quote me on anything that I'm telling. It's going to get some backlash for this one because I, said October and it was September, something like that. But it's what I remember right was there was too much bycatch from the commercial netters and the sport fishery on top of it. It couldn't sustain that level of retention. And so they cut the sport fishery, which I don't agree with gill nets, but they have a place too. There's a balance, it's not just cut them off and give them all to us. We have to work together. Everybody's trying to make a living. But it decimated the catch and release fishery. People don't want to go up there and catch and release.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's marketing or what that is, but
yeah, I'm not sure either. I will say this though, the NSIA, we've got a track record that if the numbers show that a fishery needs to be shut down, we support it. We get it. It's not like, oh well, we want to kill the last fish. That's definitely not us, because there again, we're an industry group. We want these guys to be successful, the businesses going forward. And if we kill the last fish, that ain't going to happen. So don't believe that we are, so pro harvest that we aren't sensitive to the numbers and the fact that there are fisheries that are going to need to be shut down at times because the fish didn't show up, whether they, all didn't survive in the ocean or whatever the reasons may be. And there's lots of different reasons, but like I say, NSIA has a track record of supporting closing fisheries when the numbers unequivocally tell us we got a problem. So,
do you think we have enough data here on like the Southern Oregon steelhead fisheries to make a decision either way?
Boy, that's a tough one since we don't have the gold ray to count and such. I do think that a couple of things. I think that in terms of the Rogue River, the netting on the down at Huntley Park is a good indicator.
But that's only summer fish, because they end
primarily.
I think November or something is when they end netting.
Right. But the way I look at it, and a lot of people will disagree, I'm sure, is that I rely on our fisheries managers to make a sound decision. I don't feel qualified to second guess that. I've been like I say, a sporting goods fish camp, marine shooting sports for 40 years. I wouldn't expect a layman to come and tell me how to do my job. And I look at that just the opposite. I don't feel qualified, and I don't agree with everything ODF and W does.
That's not what you just said, Dave.
Well, no, what I said is I don't tell them how to do their job. I didn't say I agree with everything they said, but there's a difference. But at any rate, so that's how I look at it. And I understand and I appreciate that guides are on the river every day and they see what's going on every day. But I have a problem with them thinking they could second guess ODF and W. Not just them, everyday anglers too.
So, I mean, kind of going off of that, recently on the North Umpqua, the scientists said that the hatchery shouldn't be shut down to provide that opportunity, and yet the commission went against that recommendation and was going to eliminate it. And most of that commission, I mean, from what we've learned, several members don't even have hunting or fishing licenses and don't partake in the sport. I mean, so here we are saying that if we're a layman and don't have that education on the resource, that we shouldn't have a big say in it, but yet somehow this commission that doesn't have any education is having full say on an issue. So, I mean,
and I don't disagree. We got a real problem there. And I started to bring that up earlier. Anybody that doesn't believe that politics has a lot to do with our fisheries,
absolutely,
the rules that our commission are making, really need to educate themselves. And that's where we're at today, as I see it. And I, like Todd, I want to choose my words carefully, but we got a real problem on that commission. And we got a real problem with the governor that appointed that commission, as far as I'm concerned. And so, again, I don't think people understand the influence that politics and personal ideologies on that commission, how much that influences what's going on. And I'm not saying that that's good by any means. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Like you say,
well, you got to.
They don't have they don't fish and hunt. They don't have a card in the game, and they're being influenced again. And what I mentioned earlier, there's all these groups at Trout Unlimited, and some of these guys, I mean, they're very powerful lobby, and
absolutely,
and they're hammering these folks. And so,
well, and we got to go back a little bit. The guides, the guides that are on the water every day. What better resources is there than us? It's, if you want to count fish, who's going to catch 9 out of 10 of the fish on that river? It's not going to be the blue collar fisherman. It's going to be a proficient guide in his area. And so you can't discredit the numbers that we're seeing compared to, if there's fish there to get by all of us.
So in light of what you just, so in light of what you just said, how about we limit the number of guides that are out on the river?
Why would we limit the number of guys?
Well, because you just said you're the one that are catching all the fish. And so if we got a problem, rather than telling the blue collar guy that just spent $100 on licenses and bait and tackle that he can't kill a fish, why don't we take a different approach and try to protect those fish in a different way?
Because he's still not going to catch fish.
Well,
it doesn't matter how many fish I catch. He's still not going to go down to the river and be proficient with what he's using.
But so to answer your question, Dave, the guides provide an opportunity for any sport fisherman to go out and experience and have a chance at harvesting a fish. It's not
if they won't let them harvest the fish. He just said it. You don't let them harvest the fish.
So if the regulations allow it, you've got Todd who may not allow it, but you have another guide. So the economics, supply and demand, are going to solve that equation for you. Todd will go out of business if nobody wants to go out for catch and release only, and another guide may go out of business if people want to just go out for catch and release. But so the guides provide this important opportunity for anybody to be able to go out and go fishing.
Anybody that can afford it.
True. I would argue that $225 isn't that much when you consider if you want to supply yourself with rods, reels, tackle, gas, bait, everything that goes into it. Plus, you need to actually spend the time to educate yourself on the fishery, how to catch the fish. I mean, if you look at your cost per hour, your time, the value that you have for your time, it's probably better spent paying that $225 with a guide rather than spending 10 hours to educate yourself, all this time all this money on rods, reels, and tackle if you're only going to go out for a couple days a year. But so the guides provide this opportunity for anybody to go out there. They don't have to invest $50,000 in a boat or $10,000 in a boat. They don't have to invest in an F-150 to be able to pull that boat. They don't have to spend all the money to upkeep the boat. So guides provide this important opportunity for anybody to be able to utilize the resource.
Well, I don't disagree that they provide an excellent opportunity. I have a problem with anybody because there are people out there, again, I run into them a lot, that they don't have that kind of money. They got $50 to go buy a cheap combo at Weimar and a pack of hooks and some bait, but they don't have the kind of money to hire a guide. Again, that's that blue collar angler I'm talking about. To make it sound like anybody can go spend $250, I don't know what the going rate is, but whatever it would be. And don't get me wrong, I understand the investment the guides make. I get that. But like I say, there's people that are scraping to come up with enough money to buy a license and tag and an inexpensive Weimar combo and some bait and tackle. And so they're not able to go out and hire a guide. And, like I say, and I don't want to discredit the guides so much, but like I say, as Todd said, they're catching the bulk of the fish.
We're on the water. We're on the water every day, and we're not bound to Casey Park. We're not bound to the slide hole. We're not bound to the hatchery hole. It's all private property. We're not bound to Denman, so I can cover 20 river miles. It's not that I'm a better fisherman. It's that I have more access than the lay person that can't afford the boat and everything to do that. I don't disagree. And so it's not just that's why we catch the majority of fish. But I'm telling the water every day. I can tell you that that's not the backbone of the industry. And like I say, we're an industry group. Like you say, you buy the tackle and the boat and all that. Well, the guy that's hiring you isn't going down to the local sporting goods store and buying that stuff. Some of them are, they're going with you to learn and then they go buy. But I would say, 60 to 65% of my guests have boats. They fish with me because I'm fun to hang out with. And when they come here on vacation, they can go right to fishing, learn a section of river, and then take their boat and duplicate what we just did. I don't have any secrets. I'm going to show you exactly where I do it, how I do it. I believe there's enough fish for everybody. I want people to utilize the resource. But at the same time, if you cannot afford to go fishing, then you need to pay more attention to your family. And it's a priority issue at that point. We live in the greatest country there is. If you want more out of this life, then work harder. I mean, that it literally is. I don't buy that they can't afford. I'm not saying everybody can afford it, but I don't buy into that. I got to bend the knee to people because they don't want to afford it and their priorities aren't in a place. It's where do you want to work right now? I mean, the jobs are everywhere. I don't buy into that. You can't afford it. Like I said, I'll guarantee there's alcohol, tobacco, lottery, and some marijuana in that truck. I'll guarantee it. So it's a priority issue.
I mean, there wasn't when I was a kid going out and doing that, but
my dad worked in the mill, and we got by, but there wasn't marijuana and beer and crap in the truck, and he worked his ass off, and he couldn't afford to hire a guide. I'm sorry, I'm not buying what you just said. There are people that are working their butts off, and to say just go work harder and make more money sounds really good, but it's not practical, especially here in Southern Oregon.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding me right now, Dave?
I am absolutely not kidding you.
There's 20 help wanted signs at every store I go by.
Yep, and you can go get a job for $14 an hour all day long. Is that going to give you enough to raise a family of 4, buy a boat, buy tackle, buy gear, and buy stuff and go fishing? No, it's not. It's going to give you enough to feed your family.
Why did I have 4 kids if I couldn't afford them?
So guys, kind of get back on track here a little bit. I mean,
we're not going to agree.
So if somebody was at that point, though, wouldn't the priority be to spend that money to go buy fish from the grocery store? I mean, how do we balance this our fisheries are a great resource, and not just for keeping the fish. You can go out there and catch and release, and it's a great release kind of to get out in nature. There's been a lot of people that have told me that fishing has saved them from an addiction, whether it be drinking,
Sure.
drugs, just getting out in nature is this great resource. Um, and so, I mean, really, if you're spending your money and you need the food on your table, you're better off going to the store to buy it for $10 a pound than going out to the river to harvest it. But we're talking about opportunities here. And so how do you balance that? I mean, how do you allow the blue collar fishermen to go out there and have those opportunities, the same opportunities that somebody that can afford to hire a guide? How I assume that's what the NSIA is kind of fighting for, and what you're kind of advocating there, Dave.
Well, it's habitat and hatcheries and harvest is how we look at it, and so yeah, that's part of it. And in my opinion, one way you balance that is nobody needs to keep 10 fish of salmon a year or something. Let them go out and catch, like we were just on the Coos, and you're allowed one a day, 2 or 3 a year of wild fish. And to me, that makes sense. Again, I love to eat fish, and I'll generally have some in the freezer, but I don't need to bring home 10, adult salmon to put in my freezer. And then I remember back in the day when they were allowing a harvest on the Umpqua, a lot of these guys would come up and hire a guide and go out, catch a fish, kill it, and you'd find them in the dumpster at the motel the next day because they didn't have any way to keep them and take them home. I've heard a lot of war stories about that. So that kind of stuff can't be allowed. I mean, like you say, we got to find a balance. And I don't have a magic wand to make it, but I think through limiting harvest is one way. Again, nobody needs to keep 10 salmon a year. If so, that they ain't eating anything else.
Is that wild retention on salmon in the Coos? They just did that this year, right? Or has that always been that way?
No, I came back this year. It was, I think, well, don't quote me. I'm not sure, but it hasn't always been that way.
Right. And so that's a great story. That's a great story of a little bit of limited before, and now look at the opportunity. You had the opportunity to go get three wild fish out of there this season. I mean, that to me, that's a great story. Is it came back from being bad to now there's an allowable, sustainable resource in that river. To me, that's fantastic. But they obviously have the data to prove that. To say this is a sound decision.
Right.
And so, that's a success on many levels.
Well, it used to drive me crazy. I've over the years heard guys that go up to the hatchery hole there above Casey Park, and they'll brag about how used to oh man, I kept 25 salmon in my freezer this year, that kind of crap. Well, that's ridiculous. Nobody, like I say, needs that many fish. And so I guess it goes back to what Steven said. We got to find that balance.
Absolutely.
That's how I see it.
No, I think, and we can definitely agree on the balance. There is a balance there.
Right.
I don't know what that balance is, and I hate saying that because I should have a solution to the problem. Otherwise, I'm just part of the problem. That's why I hate that. But that's what we're working on with this is making the discussion to get it, to air it out there to where we're not going to agree on everything. There's
if we do, we got a problem.
Absolutely. And I don't want to surround myself with people that agree with everything that I agree with.
Right.
I believe what I believe because of my life experience. I come from a place that I'm very blessed and fortunate now in my life. And it hasn't always been that. And so I am pretty hard nosed when it comes to those things. And I want people to have opportunity, but opportunity comes Opportunity comes later when you've done everything to make the best in your life of being free. Like Steven said earlier, it's a disconnect. It's I don't know if I make it after I lost my leg. I don't know if I make it if I didn't have fishing. It's literally, when I go fishing, there's a brief moment in time to where I disconnect from everything that's going on around me, and I completely immerse in the moment. And a lot of people don't allow themselves that. They're out there with an agenda. And I don't begrudge anybody for wanting to take a fish home, Dave. I really don't. I understand people want to feed their family. There's a lot of things that are empowering when you go home and feed your family with what you just did. There's a lot of self-esteem work that happens when you have that security in knowing that you can do that. And I don't want to deny anybody that. But there's a brief moment in time to where I don't think about anything, all the stress, the pain, the everything that my world consists of. That's why I go fishing.
Well, I was just gonna say that's a big reason why I go fishing. Like I say, I'm certainly not rich, but I'm comfortable. If I need to go buy food, I don't have to rely on
Right.
fresh fish that I.
Right.
But like you, I go to get away from all the BS of life.
Right.
and so
there
are those that don't, which is unfortunate. But it's just, again, I guess it's back to that balance. And what I was saying, as I see it, the problem is, and it's not only in fishing, but with rights come responsibility.
Absolutely.
And yes, I have the right to go out and harvest a fish. At the same time, I have the responsibility not to overdo that resource and not to kill the last damn fish in the river, which
Right.
There are those that would. And so that's, I guess, where I see some of the disconnect that you mentioned is people sometimes say, well, it's my right. And yes, it is your right, but you also have the responsibility not to overdo and such. So.
Well, and you know as well as I do, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
No.
And I'm sure you've caught a lot of fish that you could have killed, and you're like, you know what? Hey, it's one that's either one of my buddies just caught a pig of a salmon. I mean, one of the biggest salmon I've seen out of the Rogue River in a long time, and he's got a video of that fish swimming off, and so.
Those are genetics we don't want to take out of the river.
Absolutely. And so, we all have that mentality of, I want one for the table, but I'm fine with a 14-pounder. I don't need to kill a 35 or 40-pound fish. It was a phenomenal fish. It's the dandy. But, you hope sportsman, the term sportsman means what you just said. There's a responsibility, if the Riley Wallace, young kid coming up through the ranks, good kid, he kills wild fish and, pretty much says, I'm not going to throw back a fish that I think's not going to make it. And I agree with it.
It's a responsible way to look at it. Right.
Absolutely. You're taking that fish home, and so, it's not as black and white as what we want to make it be, right. But opportunity for the blue collar fisherman, it's a lot more than just a rod reel. Like I said, they're going to go to Casey Park. There's shit, Stephen, in the upper river. What do you have? You have Casey Park. You have the hatchery hole, McGregor, Casey Park, slide hole, all right there or the chief hole, all right there within the hatchery. And then once you get to the slide hole, you're not fishing again until you get to Shady Rogel.
To the boat ramp or the boat ramp. Yeah, Rogel or the boat ramp.
To Kelma.
But,
and so,
I'm seeing there again, I remember they're talking about the good old days. I remember in the 80s when I lived in White City, I spent a lot of time fishing up there, those holes you just mentioned. And the number of fish that were, and I saw foul hook and drugged out of there, and it was, I quit going. It just made me sick, quite frankly. The jerkers and like I say, the amount of fish that were drugged out of those holes, it was insane. I've seen people fight over it at Casey Park and such, and
I've been on that river a lot lately since I've been home. Been on the river a lot. I have seen one guy fishing the slide hole that was bug and bubble fishing and a few fly fishermen. Everybody else is running spinners and worms. And I pull right over to you and say, and I just educate you. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I am going to remind you that it's fly fishing only. And if you don't have the right tackle, I will give you a bobber. I'll give you some flies. I will give you the right tackle so you don't get a ticket.
Yeah.
And then I say, have a great day. And I row off. Education is, but I don't begrudge the angler, Dave. I've fished all over the Pacific Northwest, from the peninsula of Washington all the way down California over into Idaho, through my life travels, and I've never seen a river cut up like the Rogue River. As far as this point to this point, you can do this, you can't do that. I think that is a big thing that's got to be fixed. A lot of these people want to go fishing and they have no idea. In all honesty, I would say 9 out of 10 of them have no idea they're doing something that illegal.
Yeah, it could be.
When you see the look on their face, they're like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." You can tell when somebody's bullshitting you or somebody's legitimate.
It's very confusing. I'll give you that. It's very
the Rogue River. It is. It's very confusing, and I think they could streamline a lot of that with, I don't know, just having a Rogue River. This is where Shady Cove boat rent. Flat out tell people where these spots are, so they know.
That would be a big help. You're right. A lot of times when I'm working over in the Medford market just for fun, I'll come home down Gold Ray Road. And I was thinking about that just today, Fisher's Ferry boat ramp and such. There again, the average blue collar angler has no freaking idea where that is.
Nope.
And I get that. Yeah.
And so, it's.
I see kind of 2 points from the discussion that we've kind of had this evening. Is one, we don't use data. We don't either have the data or we don't use the data. Our decisions aren't data driven. Like, we wouldn't be having a discussion right now on whether we should be harvesting wild winter steelhead in Southern Oregon if there was actually data on how many fish were coming back every year. If we had fish count numbers that updated 24/7 for us, we wouldn't be having this discussion if we knew that it's 10% of the run or 5% of the run or whatever it may be. So that's one of the big things that I've just seen as we kind of talk tonight. And then the other is just education. Department of Fish and Wildlife isn't educating anglers. They make it more complicated than they are actually helping people kind of get out there and go fishing. And then, even with the organizations, it's just, we're not getting the word out about the best ways to do things. We're not educating people on, it could be the regulations, the opportunities, whatever it is. And then, like I was just saying, it's not data driven. So we're really just sitting here arguing about our emotions and our feelings on these fisheries. And we're not really using any sound science and education to allow people to access these opportunities to their full potential.
No, absolutely. It's the
and through there.
I don't understand why Gold Ray was taken out without something else to put in its place. Why was there not a sonar put in? Why was there not? If you're going to take out a fish
I got the answer
station,
to that.
What?
I got the answer to the sonar.
What's that?
It's not an exact science.
It's not specific. It's not species specific.
And
that could be a species specific that goes through there.
And you have to train somebody on how to read it. It's not, you don't just see a fish go by. It's like you trying to read my live scope without ever looking at my live scope. It's, they have 70, don't quote me on the numbers, but I want to say 72 or 78 of them in California, and they are worthless. because you get stripers that go like this, hit warm water and then go back like this, and then hit warm cold water and go back like that. So it's not data that you can rely on. It gives you data, but it's not data that you can effectively rely on to make policy changes because it's not that clear and simple. And so I think without a dam, the only other option you have is a weir. You have to put eyes on that, but then you got to staff it. You know, then you got to have somebody sitting there. That's a Chinook. That's a steelhead. You know, I mean, that data. Yeah, I mean, how do you get that data? I mean, you know, reliable data. How do you get reliable data that you can bank on?
That's the big question, how to get it. Right. You know, it's interesting. You talk about fish going back and forth. I read a book about up on the Umpqua, and that would go up and come back down and turn around and go back up. They would go back and forth throughout the season. So like you say, how do you get sound data? I just, you know, that's obviously that's the $1 million question. And I certainly agree with, you know, the fact that we need all that we can get. There's no question. They do red counts and such, but there again, a lot of that comes to manpower too. I mean,
they were up counting reds today.
What's that?
They're up counting reds today. I seen the fishing game ODFW counting reds today.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
they're working.
So if you need the manpower,
yeah, they're trying.
Like we were talking earlier, you've got a whole host of guides on the river that the ODFW can tap into. Yeah, I mean that they're doing it.
I got the answer to this.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'm full of answers tonight. Look out! And so, because I brought this up, and after they remove Gold Ray, they come up with a plan to count salmon in this manner. Okay, and so they have all of our policies are based off of them counting salmon in this manner. If they change in how they're counting the salmon now, that's going to throw that equation off. That makes sense. So
yes,
if now they go to count because all the data that they have up till now where they make the policies is based off of counting fish in this manner, and so it's a track record of data on, you know, this is how many fish are on this section right here. This is how many fish are on this section. And so if you throw a different dynamic in how you're counting fish now, you're going to throw that equation off, and you would almost have to overlap those. You would almost have to overlap those counts for 10 years. Yeah. You know, if you're going to start to do it a different way now, you would have to do that for 10 years. And then you can rely on the data.
Yeah, you do it for 10 years and you compare it to the data that you've been doing for 30, 50 years or whatever.
Yes, but you would still have to do the same counts that you do now.
Yeah.
For the same 10, you know what I mean?
Right. But so now
so
now you have more data. So you're doing the same as you've been doing for the last 50 years, and you have a new data source and you can compare those, but now you have more data. So why would you not utilize as much data as you can?
Well, I mean, I didn't think of it that way until you just said it out loud. And so I think that is something that we could take to the table. Again, because we got to get people out. This isn't an instant gratification thing. This is something that's going to take time, you know, and we all have to be willing to invest that time to make this better for everybody, for my grandchildren, for your grandchildren and children. It's not as easy. It's not just turning on the light switch, and unfortunately that's what everybody wants. You know, I want to fix right now, next year.
You can make it as easy.
It's not going to happen that quick.
Because the guys are making a living off it. So you have this huge resource of anglers on the water every day. ODFW can make it as easy as, okay, to get your guide license, you have to go through this 1 or 2 day course. We're going to teach you these steps, and we're going to require you to collect this data for us. You're still going to be able to do your job, but now we don't even have to pay you. You're going to go out there and make money off of this, and you're going to collect data for us at the same time. I mean, it would be as simple as that. And now you have data on every river that all these guys are fishing.
I That sounds reasonable, except I think you're going to have create a war. But I don't know. I could be wrong.
But so, I mean, if you're a guide,
I'm just wondering if how many of the guides would go for that. I don't know.
So,
well, I
mean,
think
if
you're
you're
going to
a guide,
run into a lot of.
Why would you not want to help the resource though? If you know that your data, yes, okay, you might have this thought that you're giving data to the ODFW and they're going to shut down your fishery because of it. But so you have to have some kind of trust built in there, I guess. But if you knew that that data could help continue this opportunity to have wild steelhead harvest, or even reopen a harvest in the area that's been closed down because you're on the river and you're seeing that there's more fish there. I mean, if you're a guide, it should only be to your benefit. Yes, you might lose an opportunity if the numbers aren't there, but at that point, you shouldn't be fishing and harvesting on the resource if the numbers say that you shouldn't be there.
Well, this is where I side with the. It is my livelihood, and I chose this livelihood willingly. But it's not about me; it's about the resource. And so I don't like that. I don't like that argument because I chose to make money in this industry doesn't give me the right to decimate the resource. It's everything that I want to do. Yes, I want to make money, but not at the risk of decimating the resource. I will go get a $14 an hour job at McDonald's or wherever else if instead of decimating that resource, I will quit guiding. And so I'm not afraid of giving them the data and letting them make the best decision. I didn't go to college to understand fisheries the way that these men and women have. And so if it does come to that, I side with yes. If it's not a prudent thing for the resource, then I don't want to be a part of it. It's like I said, it's not about me. It's about, it's about like the coos. It's about taking a resource that's struggling, making it better. And maybe in 5 or 7 years, you have opportunity to go get 3 wild fish. That's a success story. And so, yeah. I mean, that's where I see it. Look at Nate on the Umpqua with the broodstock program. You got a bunch of people that fish that fishery. I personally do not fish the Umpqua. Not because I don't want to, it's just because I like fishing the Rogue, and so I stay on the Rogue. I don't want to travel an hour and a half to go fishing every morning. Look at how many people donate to the broodstock. It's very few, and how come they have such a hard time getting guys to donate to them?
Well, I mean, and I very much respect you for what you just said and for your outlook. Again, I was real active back in the 90s or late 90s, I guess it was, in getting Savage Rapids Dam removed. And so was NSIA. We were interveners in the lawsuit and such. And I had people, and I'm not going to mention names, but I had people that guided up there that were pissed off at me because we wanted that dam down because the barrel that they could catch spring salmon out of now was going to go away. How could you do that? We could go up there and almost guarantee a limit of fish, and you're taking that dam out of there and those fish. And so, unfortunately, not everyone thinks like we do, I guess is what I'm saying. And
right.
It was quite the eye-opener because like what you just, I would think they would want to sustain the resource and do anything they could to make sure that they've got a career and a job for, to however long they wanted to, but that was not the case. And it wasn't only guides, don't get me wrong. There was blue collar anglers, the same thing. God, you're taking away my ability to go up there and catch a fish. Well, if you can't catch them the right way, I don't know what to tell you.
Anyway. Right. I mean, and that's, and yeah, it is an emotional debate, but the solutions, I think that, what Steven said earlier, by all means, let me get in my drift boat and, with another person and count, ODF&W is hard pressed for staffing and funds. And so it's, even if it's just volunteers, Maybe we do. Maybe we propose that. Maybe we propose let us count fish this way for the next 6 years, and and we'll give you the data. It's to see what that but I think I mean you gotta be willing to take the good with the bad. You go into it with the greatest intentions of we need more fish, and maybe the outcome is the other way around. I mean, it literally is one of those be careful what you wish for things.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Careful what you. But there again, in terms of NSIA and my own personal feelings, is if we get surprise data. And, oh, by the way, there's not near as many fish as we'd like to believe. Then I'm all for it. Shut it down. Because like you just meant, I want my grandkids to be able to enjoy this fish. Hell, as my buddy says, I'm on the back nine. I don't know what hole's going to take me, but at 68 years old, I'm on the back nine. I'm not going to be around a whole lot longer, but by God, my grandkids coming up and my buddies' kids and grandkids and all those things, I want them to be able to enjoy this fishery like I have my whole life. So.
Absolutely. And so, my guys get as much kick out of watching those salmon up there spawning, when we're floating by them and they're on their reds jockeying for position. There's some big springers up there. I mean, and it's cool to see. There's a lot of salmon in the upper river right now. And you just touch base. It's a feel good story, because it hasn't been that way the last 4 or 5 years. And so I've watched those reds start to shrink pretty bad to a place of, oh shit, this isn't good. And so it's nice to see them back like they were when I first started, that 7-8 years ago. It hasn't been that way in a number of years, but I haven't rode for a couple seasons, but here and there. And so, I haven't been on the upper river like I have been this season already. So, it's not a real good, just going off of what everybody else says, the couple times I've seen it there. It's good. It makes you feel good that they're thriving. But we had a good water year. So
had a good water year, and ocean conditions have so much to do with it.
Absolutely.
I really don't think the average person gives the amount of credit to what goes on in the ocean as they should. There again, there's so many different variables. Not everybody, but too many people want one silver bullet. Oh, we got to dump more fish in. Oh, we got to do this. Oh, we got to do that. There is not, like I say, just one silver bullet.
Well, and the other argument is, the PHOS. It's the river used to have 200,000 fish in it. Well, we can't just put that many fish in this river because of the PHOS, what they will allow. It's not, you're talking two different conversations at that point.
Right.
It's not what the river can sustain. We still can only be within the PHOS limits. And so it is, there's no, like you just said, there's no magic bullet. There's so many facets to this, right, that there is no one answer. I think,
and then that's where I get sometimes frustrated, is that the number of people that don't realize that there's so many different aspects and angles. And look at, there again, I've fished this river my whole life, and the amount of development that has taken place, the hotter water, the lack of riparian shade, and just so many changes that have come over the years. The amount of water that's sucked out of my illegal pot grows right now.
Right.
Just stuff like that. What do we do about that? I don't have the answers.
Well, I think Jackson County Sheriff's Department's doing a great job.
Sure.
Again, it takes funding. They got, I believe they got enough funding to have a couple full-time positions for the task force that targets those illegal grows. They're trying to combat it on their level. Look at that grow that just got busted. What'd they say? Is it over 1 million gallons of water they stole in a pretty short amount of time? Now, times that by all the illegal grows, that's where our water's going.
Oh,
look at, there's 1,100 coming out at Gull Ray or Coal Rivers. and it's 800 in Grants Pass.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it's been hot, but not that hot.
Come on now. I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of water. And so, again, I mean, there's just so many different dynamics.
Well, what I want to know, now we're getting off track again, but I don't know. I read the amounts of tons, and it's a tonnage of pot that they're harvesting. Where the heck is all that pot going?
Missouri?
Yeah, back east somewhere.
I guess where it's illegal, evidently.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's atrocious. And so, they're doing the best they can to combat that. You know,
Sure.
and then I mean, it's the people doing the yard work, clear cutting on the river. You know, I mean, look at what they're doing at Bear Creek right now after the fire. You know, I got sent an email about there's rules like, you know, for our houses and, you know, or anybody else, you know, the state agencies and all that. They don't just get it going and do whatever they want along those rivers and creeks. Well, they're not abiding by their own rules coming down Bear Creek. You know, I gotta read the email and do a little bit more digging to make sure it is what I think it is. But how can those rules be in place for us, but not them? You know, the city can't, you know, Talent, Phoenix can't do that. They, you know, they're hurting everything downriver from them.
Right.
And so, you know, we can't allow that. You know, I mean, it was a horrible thing. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, we still got to do what's right for that watershed.
Right.
I mean, it's having a bad enough problem as it is, and the fire didn't help. But you can't just, you know, not abide by those laws because it's convenient and cheap.
Right.
Have you been down?
That's what it looks like is happening.
Have you been down to the lower or kind of down there by Graves Creek, Dave, to see what that fire did?
I have not personally. I have a friend that lives down there right by Alameda, and she sent me some pictures. And then actually, I saw some pictures on Facebook the other day, and I'm very concerned about what that's going to do down the road in terms of heat. You know, the heat of the water, as well as silt and runoff and such as going in there. Quite frankly, I've thought about going down, and I'm not sure I want to. I think it's going to be very ugly. I remember I used to run the river, the canyon a lot at rafting season and such. I'd make 7 or 8 trips a summer a lot of times, and I remember the Quail Creek fire and watching that, and then watching that heal and change over the years, and it will heal eventually, but it takes a long, long time. And so I just saw a picture yesterday somebody sent me of at Ennis River and the camping area right below that. Excuse me, not Ennis River, Argo, and it burned it, and it's gone. It's just all dead, burnt trees. And like I say, that kind of stuff is going to have an impact on our river and the quality of the water and such. So it's very troubling.
Yeah, it's
and that's not even counting the tributaries.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting, you know, everybody kind of wants this magic bullet or point fingers at whoever's responsible. And, you know, we were talking, it's ocean conditions, the fires, which, I mean, nobody's responsible for what's going to happen after that. You know, the ODFW isn't responsible for all the silt that's going to run off from the fires that's going to affect our fisheries. And so there's too many variables that are all going into this that we can't just blame one person or one thing on what's affecting all of our fisheries and opportunities.
I totally agree. I had an instance just last week. I live on East Jones Creek, a tributary of the road, and I'm about a mile up from the confluence of East and West Jones. And where East and West Jones Creek Road comes together, there's, pardon me, but there's a slum as far as I'm concerned. There's about 4 trailers, and the amount of dead cars and trash and garbage and crap that's in there. And I was talking to Dan Van Dyke at ODF&W. I said, Dan, they've denuded the side of the creek. They've taken all the brush away, so it's right down into the creek. And I said, I don't have any idea what kind of trash and crap they're throwing in there. He said, well, I'll call the code enforcement people in Josephine County, But the problem is they're so busy right now dealing with the pot issue. I don't know that that'll be a priority to them. And there again, a lot of people want to blame ODF and W for that. They have no jurisdiction to speak of over that. That's all about code enforcement. So it goes back to just what you're saying. There's not one silver bullet, and it's much more complicated, I believe, than a lot of people realize. It's very frustrating because like I say, I live on the creek. My brother's next door. Between us, we've got about 16 acres here, and we've been out here since my folks bought the property in the 70s. But we've always made a point to not over thin and take care of the resource, take care of the creek, not make it so that it's going to heat up, and even the way I planned my home and driveway and such, so that there's not runoff going into the creek and those sorts of things. But a lot of people don't have that. They don't care.
Right.
It's interesting. It's sad. That's what it is.
Yep. Well, guys, we've been talking for almost an hour and 45 minutes. Is there anything else either one of you had questions for each other or any topics you wanted to talk about?
No, I have no questions. I just have a comment, and that is that I very much appreciate what you've got going on here and what you're doing and what you've started. It takes these types of things and people giving a damn enough to get involved and do something. And there again, that's one of my frustrations. I've suggested to people over the years that they get involved, go to an ODF&W meeting, or just do something to try to help. And I don't have time, or I won't do that, or they won't listen to me anyway. And it's very frustrating. So I just want to compliment you guys on what you're doing. We aren't going to agree on everything, and that's fine. Like I say, if we do, we got problems as far as I'm concerned. But the fact that we're able to come together and have these conversations, and while we're not biologists or not specialists, I think all three of us have enough personal experience to have some decent ideas and such. And speaking for myself, I've worked with a whole lot of different groups and such in terms of ODF&W Fish Trading Task Force and the BLM Resource Advisory Committee and the Watershed Councils, that I've learned a lot as well. And I just think I wish people would get more involved, I guess is what I'm saying. And I appreciate that you're giving a venue and an avenue to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. Yes, I appreciate it very much. It's what we decided was we're going to start the conversation. Just because just because you don't want to hear it or don't like to hear it doesn't mean we can't have a conversation about it. It's not as trying to get back to how it used to be. We're going to have a healthy conversation. And through that conversation, as you will come up, when you have a conversation and brainstorm and spitball with people that think a little bit different on, we think pretty much the same thing.
Right. We all want the same thing.
Absolutely. And so you come together to where, hey, that idea made sense. It's because we don't have that local tackle shop anymore, and we've said this, you don't have that local meeting place. That's why we started the Discord.
Yep.
To people can get in there and talk fishing. Just, this is what it is. They don't have that avenue anymore to have these conversations, to go to ODF&W and say, hey, is this a viable plan? We would like to implement something like this, and start to do something different, because what we're doing isn't working.
Right.
I think, I think that's where the frustration is, and we can all agree on what we're doing is not working. I mean, we're all everybody's just barely treading water at this point. And so, it's I want to stop thinking what I know and start seeking out the answers to the things that I do know. There's, if that makes any sense at all, we all think one way or another, but like I said, through these conversations, people have reached out to me, I've reached out to them, and it's changed. I've started to broaden my perspective, my to where I look at things a lot broader than I did before. in a short amount of time. We've only been doing this a couple months,
Yeah.
I honestly, openly admit I had some pretty good tunnel vision going into it. And I failed and I let myself down by doing that, because I stopped looking at everything that went into it. I was just focused on this one thing. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to myself, to limit myself to just that knowledge of what I wanted to hear. So, sure. That's why I love these podcasts. It's not convenient for me. I'm tired. I literally just got home. I shoved some food down my belly because I love food, and literally got right in here for this. But you have to make time if it's important enough, and that's what I tell everybody. If it's important enough, you will make time.
Yep.
And so don't tell me that it's important to you if you're not making time, because I'm cut and dry when it comes to these things. If it's important enough to you, you will make time for it.
Right.
So
you're absolutely right. Like I say, and again, I appreciate that you're giving them a platform to do that. Yes, it takes time. Yeah, there was a time when I got off the watershed councils and such, and I spent 8 years on our local school board. And I can't tell you how many times I'd get a call from a parent that was ticked off about something. And I say, well, you need to come to a school board meeting. That way the rest of the board can hear your complaint, as well as our administrators. Oh, no, I can't do that. I couldn't do that. In my mind at that moment, I said, well, I can't help. I'm not going to carry all your weight. It's just like you say, people need to get involved if they care.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's getting involved. It's having these conversations. It's trying to educate yourself. And it's trying to push your own thinking. I mean, that's why I've started this, is to have people come on that may not agree with my thought process and what I believe is going on with our fisheries, just so I can challenge myself, so somebody can prove me wrong, and that we can do it in a way where everybody can see that conversation and those different thought processes and access it themselves, so that they can try and hopefully challenge themselves and educate themselves, and then hopefully push themselves to be more involved, because they see that there might actually be a chance to make some kind of difference on it.
Yep. Because I'll go right back to say it again. Individually, we're really hard to hear. Collectively, we're really hard to ignore.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I agree.
So, and I get to show off my beautiful butt every Monday. So take that.
And that is a dandy. I've been looking at it. It's a dandy.
That's number 11, Columbia Blacktail, Dave.
Awesome.
Pope and Young. Number 11 all-time Pope and Young Columbia Blacktail.
Good job. Wow, man, what a thrill.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So all right.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, we like to end every episode with a piece of alpha for our audience. So that's your best piece of advice. It could be fishing, could be life, whatever you think somebody should take away from this episode this evening.
I think what people should take away is what we just hit on pretty heavy. Get involved. And there's an old saying that one of the radio hosts used to say, that no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And do what you can do. Do what you can do. Maybe it's volunteer to go count reds, like we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. Who knows what it might be, but anybody can do something if they'll just do it. My buddy that I fish with, we make a point every year to take part in the river cleanup that takes. Go pick up some trash, whatever it may be. I'm not expecting everybody to get into it and immerse themselves if I have, but like I say, everybody can do something. Do what you can do.
I like it.
Todd?
Me? I'm going to go fishing this time. Just because of what I've experienced this week. Man, you just can't be lazy on presentation. It literally is. That is the only difference that I see in my day is presentation. The better presentation, the more success you're going to have.
And then mine, I guess, is we're 2 months away from an election. and it's going to be a pretty important election, especially here in Oregon. This year, I recommend everybody ignore the political party of all the people. Just blank that out of your mind and look at the actual issues. Look at what they are fighting for and their beliefs, and then vote for the person that most agrees with you on what you believe in as well. We have to stop thinking of everything as a team. This is a team competition, and look at the actual individuals and what they are promising to do for us. You've got 2 months to educate yourself right now. Now's the time to do it, not when you're 1 week away from or the day of on election day.
Good advice, and for God's sake,
very good advice.
Yeah, get out and vote. No matter who you vote for, just get out and vote and share your voice.
Yes.
Very good suggestion. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. We appreciate everybody that tuned in tonight. If you'd like more information on what we're doing, you can find us at northwestfishing.club. We've got links for everything in the description of this video. Come join us in the Discord. Come chat fishing with us. And with that, guys, everybody have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
And we're off live, guys.
Sweet.